In January of 2023, my boyfriend and I decided to take a weekend trip to a couple of small towns in the central northeastern part of North Carolina. We kicked off the trip with dinner at Johnny's Barbecue in Lewisburg. We both had barbecue plates with various southern sides. Then we made a quick stop at the Goodwill to browse their music selection before heading to Tar Banks Brewery, where we met some friends and listened to some live music from a local bluegrass band called Into the Fog, and drank some refreshing beer. We took the chance to play some foosball and pinball while we were there. Eventually, we said goodbye to our friends and headed to our campsite for the night. After a night of car camping, we were up with the sun and ready for a busy day. We were greeted with a beautiful sunrise as we left our campsite.
My goodness. Pussies.
The first thing on our agenda was breakfast, of course. And so we stopped at Clee's Stop and Shop. We had found this gas station grill while planning this trip, and we decided we had to see what Clee's had to offer. We ate our delicious breakfast sandwiches in the car, and then continued on down the road to Medoc Mountain State Park for our first hike of the weekend. We did the Bluff Loop Trail, which was about 3.5 miles and an easy hike. Parts of the trail run along the fishing creek, which makes for a nice change of scenery as you hike. Seems the trail has recently been updated, as you can see here where a new set of stairs has been built beside the old, deteriorating ones. From there we drove through Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. We visited this area last year, so we didn't spend much time there, but we did stop for some caffeine at Red Rabbit Coffee, where we were served by a very friendly barista, and we grabbed a muffin while we were at it. As we were passing through Weldon, which is right by Roanoke Rapids, we passed the famous Big Fish, which is a reference to Weldon's history of being the rockfish capital of the world at one point. We actually visited this monument up close last year, so we didn't stop this time. From here we had to divert a little bit from our original plans. We had intended to eat at Walter's Grill in Murfreesboro, but when we arrived it was closed. We later found out it had permanently closed only a month prior to our visit. Luckily, a quick search of the map showed an open restaurant just 10 minutes back the way we had come in Conway, called the Trackside Tavern and Grill. We had a lunch of barbecue and chicken Philly's cheesesteak, and then continued on our journey to the next small town. We made our way back to Murfreesboro, where we planned to visit the Brady C. Jeffcoat Museum. Jeffcoat was born and raised in South Carolina. He became a dedicated collector of things and built up a large collection over time. As he got up in age, he knew he needed to find a home for his collection once he passed, and he had many people inquire about buying particular pieces of his collection, but he was only willing to give it to someone who would host the entire collection. Eventually, it ended up in this building in Murfreesboro, as they were the only ones willing to host the entire collection. There are 4 large rooms filled with various collections and themes. This room had various home goods, another was arranged in a Victorian bedroom style, and this last one held his guns and taxidermy animal collections. Even the hallways were lined with items. To highlight a few of the collections, we have the wall of bedpans, a goat-shaped umbrella holder, this RCA ad dog statue along with the ad it's depicted in, and various toasters. I honestly didn't realize how many different toasters there were. My personal favorites were the swingers and the droppers. We also made a stop in the gift shop, As we were checking out, the older gentleman helping us started telling us about a cable ferry located just down the road, and he ended up giving us directions to it. Excited by this new side quest, we decided to check it out. However, this side quest seemed doomed from the beginning. As we turned onto the road the ferry was located on, we noticed the sign, and we also noted that the lights weren't flashing, indicating the ferry was open. But according to the sign, we were coming to it during open hours, so we decided to push on as the ferry was still about 5 minutes down the road. As the road turned from paved to gravel and we came upon the gate, we quickly confirmed that the ferry was not running that day to our disappointment. The other side of the road was so near, yet so far. After wallowing in our disappointment for a couple of minutes, we turned around and headed on to our next destination. Our final activity for the day was a hike at Merchant Mill Pond State Park in Gatesville. But first we checked out the visitor center. Once we were done looking around inside, we headed around to the back of the building where the trail we had chosen began. We would be hiking the Bennett's Creek Trail. There was a nice dock at the beginning that we ventured down onto. You'll notice a canoe in the background, as you can rent canoes from the visitor center and paddle around the swamp. If we had more time, we probably would have also done that, but we were already running short on time to get to our dinner location before it closed. Bennett's Creek Trail is about 2.5 miles long and winds along the swampy terrain. At one point we came across a boardwalk, but it was very submerged, so we didn't venture out onto it. A small portion of this trail goes along the road as well. We made our way back to the visitor center in our car. We continued on to our dinner spot and the final destination for the day. We caught the last bits of a beautiful sunset as we entered the Core Peak Country Restaurant, located in the town of Core Peak. And as the name suggests, this restaurant is in the middle of nowhere. This building has existed since 1908 and was first home to the town general store, serving all the local needs. It was home to many different businesses over the years until it became a restaurant in 1986 and has remained that way ever since. We enjoyed the homemade food and cozy vibes. From there, we headed to our sleeping spot for the night and set up the car for another night of car camping. We got up early and were greeted by sunny blue skies. We drove down the road a couple of miles to the Great Dismal Swamp State Park to do a hike. You actually have to cross the river on a bridge to get to the trails, and a ranger takes down your name, car information, and phone number. This is to ensure that you don't get locked in the park overnight. We chose to do the Supplejack Trail. First we went down the canal road, about 1.5 miles. As you go down the road, you'll come across some references to local history along the way. Here is a reference to how the locals produced moonshine, and since it was illegal, they often hid their operations deep in the swamp. There were a couple of other structures further down the road with various historical significance. Then we reached an entrance to the Supplejack Trail, which took us back the way we had come, but through the bush instead of the road. Overall, we did about 2 miles, but this is a very easy trail to modify and make longer or shorter depending on how much you want to hike. In front of the visitor center, there is another short trail we did called Dismal Swamp Boardwalk, and as the name suggests, the trail is made entirely of a very long boardwalk that goes in about 1.5 mile long loop. Then we were headed back across the bridge and back to our car. We drove to our final stop of the trip, which was also breakfast. We arrived at Captain Bob's Seafood in Hertford. I enjoyed a classic pancake breakfast, and before we knew it, we were back on the road headed back to Raleigh. This was a fun little trip. It was nice to see some very small North Carolina towns and see some places that are off the beaten path in both figurative and literal ways. For more information on the places we visited, see the description below.